Yeah, Liz, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can tell the story, but I think first we're just we'll turn it over this way.
All right. So I think this is like sort of my hype up music and that'll maybe become clear later. But as Daryl said, so my name is Elizabeth Wojczynski, and my husband Greg and I did just move to Grand Rapids this summer from Pella, Iowa. And currently I teach academically talented students at Dutton Christian. But for the rest of my teaching career, I've been a language arts teacher. So in California mostly, and in Iowa. So I'm here today to talk to you about my Flex project. Also, we completed it with my 7th grade class at Pella Christian, and we published that for people to just made it public for people to listen to. So today I'm going to talk to you about that, just the process of publishing that podcast. So like I said, last year I was teaching 7th grade language arts at Pella Christian, and one big goal of mine was to try and invite more non-text outside class voices into our classroom, just like once a month. So we called these our monthly mysteries, and they were just guests that would come in they were parents or leaders of the community, whatever, that came into our class to talk. And so these guests worked really well in supporting my deep hope for my writing students, that they would glorify God by discovering ways to build upon our God-given gifts of communication and by creating beauty there for others to enjoy. So I wanted them to be able to practice listening to other people's stories and then discern truth or sometimes untruths about God, themselves, and others through these stories being told. And then we use those outside voices as inspiration for other writing assignments. So some kids did they were more artsy, so they did sketch notes, posters on the people's stories that they told, or they'd use those as inspiration for like a devotional or a short story later in class. So yeah. I use these monthly mystery guests to also kind of hit hard on my storylines too. So I did have 2 storylines the way that the classes were there. I had 2 separate English classes, like I saw each group of kids twice a day. And so I kind of tried to hit both of these, which is kind of a cool opportunity to be able to hit both of my storylines twice a day. So to listen and discern, and then to discover and create. So I really tried to stress these over the years. So our October monthly mystery visitor ended up being the mayor of Pella, and his name is Don DeWard. And so that's sort of where our story began. I'm going to have Daryl just play like the first minute or two of our first episode of our Paradise podcast, because that kind of gives you like the background information for how we got started, and just from my students' own voices. But you'll probably recognize the hype music from the beginning, because that is our intro music. So go ahead. Hey everybody, welcome to a little taste of Paradise podcast, where people considering making the move to Pella can learn about why it's an awesome place to live. I'm Elizabeth, and I teach middle school English language arts at Pella Christian Grade School here in Pella, Iowa.
In October of last year, we were visited by the mayor of Pella, Don DeWard. He graciously took time out of his busy schedule to spend an afternoon talking with our middle school students about his job, his story, and our town. One of the questions we asked him was, "What do you see as the biggest challenge that Pella faces today?" Mayor DeWard told us that recruiting and retaining employees was one of the biggest challenges he faced as a small town.
So as a class, we asked each other, what could we do as middle school students to help remedy this problem? We decided to create a podcast that could help inform people who are thinking about moving to Pella about all the great parts of living in this small Iowa town.
We were placed in groups, and together we chose a topic for our episode. We worked in groups to research, record, and edit our own work.
All right, so now you kind of have an idea of the gist of our project. with this, I did try to focus just on 3 through lines, which is what John and our other guest speaker that I can't remember her name, which is terrible. But she also kind of went through and talked about too. So first of all was the community building aspect and through line. So our podcast was kind of a very literal application of that through line. We wanted to help build Pella's community in terms of population, but we also wanted the words that we used in sharing about different businesses and the culture of Pella to really uplift the people who live there as well, and like the owners of those businesses. Secondly, we focused on being servant workers. So I tried to, stress the personal experience that I had too in moving to Pella, because we lived there for not a really long amount of time, but we were a new family too, and how nice that would have been when we moved there to kind of know what the different cultural parts of Pella were. Like tulip time is a kind of a big deal there, and it would have been cool to know a little bit more about tulip time when we moved there, and do that work for the people who are moving to our town. And then lastly, we talked about how this project involved creating beauty also for people to enjoy, which I really tried to stress in my class too, that we are beauty creators, even in our writing or however we communicate. When we talk about the real work, real need, real people aspect of Flex, we kind of just started with this real work aspect. So we figured out that our real work that we were going to end up doing really was the bulk of this project, like figuring out research skills, interview skills. I did have them draft a word for word script for each podcast because they really wanted to just wing it, and middle schoolers winging it isn't always super reliable or effective. And so I did kind of let them try that at first, but that was really an essential part of this was the script part. And then we also learned really about how to keep our audience entertained. That was something that we had listened to a bunch of different podcasts to kind of see like what worked well in some podcasts, what didn't work well. And so that was a learning experience for them too. They couldn't just like talk about everything that they wanted to talk about. They had to think about their audience too. And then they had to learn how to do some sound editing as well. So that was a little bit of a something that they needed to work on too. For the real need, that was something that, is this the right slide, Daryl? There we go. The real need. So Pella's real challenge was of recruiting and retaining employees, which came from the mouth of our mayor. And so in talking with the kids, it was a good conversation to see like, how could we help with this real need? There are a few really big businesses in Pella that do struggle with even recruiting and retaining employees for their big businesses as well, but also just to promote those smaller businesses that really did struggle during COVID as well. So, and then those real people, we worked with the mayor, who was a real person, and it was kind of fun to have him come to our classroom and talk to him. A lot of my students thought that was pretty cool to have a leader in our classroom. And then also Pella's small business owners. We had quite a few small business owners as parents of students in my classroom. And so that was pretty cool to be able to interview those people for our podcast, but then also promote them too. And the other group of people too, to the potential transplant families moving to Pella from other places as well. So the student voices side of things, to have them reflect. I kind of lucked out because we did have a local radio station come and interview my students, a couple of my students. And so it was for this podcast that they also created called Let's Talk Pella. And so if you just want to play the clip there, then you can kind of hear them reflect on a few things too from that radio station.
Well, and for the two of you, let's talk a little bit about your role in the podcast. What was your response when you first found out this is going to be your class project? And what were some of the things that you had to work on right away to kind of make this happen?
So at first we were all excited because we were like, hey, we get to do something, help out with the community. One thing we had to get started on right away was figuring out who we were going to work with and what we were going to talk about and our scripts, because that's very important.
Well, yeah, like she said, we were mostly excited, and then right away we thought about, like, are we going to interview someone? What are we going to talk about? Like, what is our main topic going to be? Because there's so many topics that we could think about in Pella.
What are the things that you think you'll take away most from this project?
I would say working with others and doing extensive research that would also interest others, because you have to make it interesting and not boring. Especially if you have families listening, you don't want someone droning on about something that only involves one other person. You want something that's entertaining. And I think, especially if you would do like a talk show or something, you want to be entertaining.
Yeah, I agree with her. We learned a lot about how to keep your audience engaged with what you do. So, like, we started off giving, like, a brief explanation, like, we're going to talk about Pella and Tulip Time and even interview the mayor. So then they would, like, stick around for the rest of the podcast and listen to all that we had to say about Tulip Time. And then we ended the podcast by interviewing the mayor.
So what I really appreciated about their reflections too is that they did really hit on a lot of the academic stuff that we did. It wasn't just about the opportunity to be super famous or anything, but they did really, they did learn a lot. And so a lot of the stuff that we focused on for the podcast is also writing skills we focused on in the classroom. So like how to research well, because you do have a large audience holding you accountable, having that solid script, also like grabbing the interest of your audience or of your reader if you're writing, all different things that we focus on in formal writing in the classroom as well. So what they don't really share on the radio interview is how group dynamics can really affect a group project like this. But I would say as much as possible, I let them pick their own groups. And honestly, even my troublesome groups really did awesome. Like people stepped up and figured out how to be leaders, even in those harder groups. They figured out who was going to be the leader, who was going to be the sound editor. That was all on them to sort of assign those jobs. And so I think that was a real big learning experience too for them to figure out how to work in a group and everybody have their own specific jobs too. So as my own takeaway, this was a super fun project. Kids buy-in, my students buy-in, especially in the very beginning, was super high. So I had students, I had to spread them all over the school so that they could record their podcast episodes. So I had them in closets, storage closets. Our cafeteria had this like little place where they sell food, had to hide them in there. They were everywhere, band practice rooms. And with any other project that I've done, I usually regret that, like having them spread all over the place, because I do a ton of like redirecting or reprimanding. But with this one, if I did a surprise check-in, like 99% of the time they were on task and they had a question about what they were supposed to be doing or needed help with something. And so it was for sure, like that was really fun as a teacher to see them really just love it. And it was really exciting too to have them see, like watch kind of our tally on Anchor FM on the website that we used and published through. You can check out the kind of the, I don't know the technical word for it, but how many people are listening to each of the episodes. And so that was really fun to project that onto the screen and be like, look, people are listening to us, and middle schoolers groan about it, but they really did have a good time. So, and it really was a ton of work for everybody. Like this project did take a really long time. You can see on my slide that these are just some of the resources that I did use. And it did take time just to like be comfortable enough with some of the software too, like the beautiful audio editor, to be able to teach kids how to use it. But overall, it's pretty user friendly too. So I was really intimidated by that at first, but it's once you get like messing around with it, it's really pretty easy. So if you have any questions, if anybody has any questions about it, I'd be happy to share what I have. So
Liz, thank you very much.
yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to, like, even as I know this from before, as I observed your work and engaged around it, but then even today I'm struck by it again, that you are a teacher that really values like craftsmanship and rigor. Like, we are going to do hard work here and good work. Can you talk a little bit then, like, how do you hold that intention with, okay, I'm not quite sure where this is going to go. I'm not, like, until the mayor shows up and speaks of this need, we don't know yet the need that we're going to do. And I know lots of teachers struggle that we say plan tight, hang loose, but hang loose can be pretty hard sometimes. Can you just speak a little bit to what that's like as a teacher?
Sure. Well, it was kind of crazy. I think it was a lot of God moving in our classroom too, because the year before I had spent the majority of spring break planning a podcast unit for my students to do after we got back from spring break. But like a lot of schools, we never came back. And so I had this unit that I had spent tons of time working on, and it was just sitting there for a year. And so when we had come back, then I had decided, like, I really would like to use this, but I just don't know how to make my student voices authentic. Like, I thought about having kids write poetry and sharing it, or writing short stories and sharing it, but nothing had been like a perfect fit for that. And so then when he came in and he had said that, I feel like that really was God's timing. Like, here, you have everything you need to do this, and here is the problem and an opportunity for kids to do that. So I mean, a lot of it, this was my first year doing this. A lot of it was just fly by the seat of your pants and figure it out, a lot of late nights with headphones on while my husband watched football or whatever. So it was, you just kind of got to roll with it and figure it out too as teachers. But
Thanks, Liz. I love the one student in the radio interview where she references the script, and then she's like, that's very important. Right?
I know.
If I'm the teacher, I'm like, yes, like, I got it. So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, really fun to hear.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for designing such a learning experience as this, that as much for the students as it was for yourself, and that is obvious as we listen. So thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you.